Also, God willing, Purim is coming very soon, right? In KNX many years ago, they said Purim is the day that all the Jews get drunk. They said that. I heard on radio. But they made a mistake. Only the ones above 21 get drunk. Under 21, they don't get drunk. By the way, they could also drink, because as we say, thank God, Budweiser came with zero alcohol beer. So you could have the fun, the taste of beer, but you don't get drunk. And then the police never come catch you either. But anyways, let's start a little bit, with this week's Parsha. And then, God willing, we're going to get to Purim. You see, this week's Parsha is a little bit interesting. From the time that Moshe Rabbeinu Moses was born, in every Parsha, his name is mentioned. As you know, the Torah says, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor." God spoke to Moshe saying, this is the only Parshah of tesaveh, that not even one time even, Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned. When God talks to him, he says, "Va'atta," and you. Doesn't say the typical way God spoke to Moshe saying. So obviously, it's a question why from all the Parshot, from the time that Moshe is born, from Parshah of Shmot, his name is mentioned, suddenly his name is not mentioned. So maybe before we go to the long answer, is actually an answer that the Vilna Gaon gives. We all know that on Tuesday was the day that Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, the 7th day of Adar. So Parashah of Tetzaveh, without any exception, it always falls to be in the week of the 7th of Adar. Now, if you have 13 months, happens to be on the Adar Aleph, the first Adar, like last year. But like this year that we only have one Adar, so it happens on the 7th of Adar, right now. So the reason why his name is not mentioned, the Torah was already hinting at the time that Moshe is going to pass away, is always going to be falling on the reading of this week's Parsha. But we're going to go to the main reason. One of the main reasons that's brought, it actually teaches us a lot of lesson. Moshe Rabbeinu one time actually gave a curse, so to speak, to himself. When the Jews made the golden calf, so Moshe Rabbeinu tells God, God wanted to destroy them all. So Moshe tells God, you know what, if you're going to forgive them, fine. If you don't want to forgive them, then please erase me from the book that you wrote. Now there's an argument, what book was he referring to? So come to the Rashbam, who's Rashi's grandchild. What he was saying was, erase me from the book of living. I rather die, not the Jewish people. That's the way the Rashbam learns it. The way Rashi learns it is that erase my name from your book, from the book of the Torah. I don't want to have my name in the Torah written if you don't forgive the Jews. So he actually told God, if you forgive them, fine. If not, I want my name to be erased. So now, even though Moshe Rabbeinu said it because it was needed to save the Jews, he didn't just say erase my name, like they call it a curse, so to speak. Besides that, it was even dependent on a condition. He didn't say erase my name no matter what. He said, if you don't want to forgive the Jews, erase my name. And God forgave the Jews anyways, so it shouldn't have been erased. But here the Gemara says the curse of, especially a Talmid Chacham, a curse of a tzaddik, a righteous person, is so powerful that even if it's dependent on a condition, and the condition anyways wasn't fulfilled, like here the Jews were forgiven, still has an effect. That's why his name was erased, because he actually cursed himself. So it's a very great lesson that we learn. Talk is not cheap. It was talk is cheap, come on. What's a big deal? I just said something hearsay. But actually words have an effect. Let's bring a couple of things that actually proves it. In the Torah, at the beginning of the Torah, when you look, when God created the animals, so it says what happened to the animals when they were created. It says Totzar, it's nefesh chaya, that from out of earth a living soul came out. The words are nefesh chaya. Chaya means living, nefesh means soul. And if you look at the translation in Aramaic, it says nafsha chayta, which means a living soul. Now, when God creates Adam and Eve, so it's very funny, same thing is used in Hebrew, but the translation suddenly changes. It says that God created Adam. It says when he blew the soul into him, Vahi Adam le nefesh chaya. Adam was, what would nefesh chaya be? A living soul. But there's a question. Animals are living soul too. Human being is living soul too. They're not the same. So because of that, the translation into Aramaic, it says over here, nefesh chaya doesn't mean living soul like animals. It means something else. What does it mean? It says leruach memalela, speaking soul. That's the difference of a human being and an animal. An animal lives, he's not there. He's not a piece of stone, but he can't communicate, he can't speak. When we call Adam Nefesh Chaya, living soul, we mean a completely different level, that he actually is able to speak. So the specialty of a human being is obviously his intellect and power of speech. So when somebody actually misuses his speech or he uses it to do something improper, he's actually damaging his status as a human being. I mean, it's very hard to understand this in America. You open up the news, everything is just bad mouthing, saying bad, cursing this or cursing that. But again, so far we're talking about cursing ourselves, not other people. And actually, he brings down something very interesting. Again, we are not maybe familiar with it because we don't see what happens in the spiritual worlds. But there's a book that's called Ma'am Lois. It's already translated into English too, called Torah and Theology. There's a world of knowledge in here. If somebody is difficult for him to follow in Hebrew, it's in English too. And it says God has created an angel that when somebody actually curses himself, like says something bad about himself, so then the angel comes and actually grabs those words and he makes sure that that happens. This is the power of the words that we have. And we know from Moshe Rabbeinu, because he cursed himself and he said, you know what, erase my name if you don't want to forgive the Jews. So that happened, at least from one portion of the Torah, his name was erased too. We actually find this in another place also. Everybody knows the story of Benjamin. When the brothers wanted to go to Egypt to buy food, right? So Yosef makes the whole story, a bunch of spies, and they say, no, we are not spies. So Yosef tells him, you know what, you got to bring Benjamin, your brother. Because they said you are 12 brothers, right? One of them is not here. We don't know where he is. We don't know where Yosef is. The other one is with his father. So Yosef, the brother that looked like an Egyptian, he says, the only way I'm going to believe your story is if you bring your younger brother down here to me. Right? Now Jacob doesn't want to do that. The beloved son, the only son left with him from his beloved wife, says, I'm not sending my son. So then Yehuda, the fourth brother, who was like the king amongst the brothers, he says, Yaakov tells his father, don't do this. If I don't bring him back alive, I'll be a sinner all my life, in this world and in the world to come. So that's what he said about himself. Actually, what happened, he took Benjamin down to Egypt, and Benjamin came back. So he fulfilled his mission. There's no reason for the curse to happen. But it says, when the Jews were coming out of Egypt and they took all the bones of the tribes out of Egypt. So, there's actually a city in Israel called Yehud. Ever been there? Why is it called Yehud? Because the bones of Yehud are buried there. Can you believe that? That's what I called it, Yehud. It's the place where so his bones are there. I was actually there once. It's like a little, cave that they have his bones there. So anyways, it says that all the other tribes, their bones were intact. They didn't get disconnected. Yehuda's bones were disconnected in the tomb. How do you know the Torah says it? Again, I didn't look inside there. So until Moshe came and he prayed for him. Why was his body not intact? What was the reason? So it says because he told his father Yaakov, if I don't bring Benjamin, I'm going to curse myself. I'll be a sinner to you all my life, in this world and in the world to come. So actually his body wasn't intact, the bones. At the same time, he wasn't allowed to go in Gan Eden properly until Moshe prayed for him. So we see a second time again that our words really have a great effect. So you have to be very careful what kind of words we use. So this is regarding ourselves.
I have a question.
What?
I have a question.
Not difficult ones. So go ahead.
Why did it first that his bones were intact?
No, he said, I'll be a sinner. So he had no peace in this world. I'm saying, I don't know exactly what the not peace is if the bones are not together. I'm not sure about it. Please don't ask me hard questions. But he wasn't even allowed to go in the academy in heaven until Moshe prayed for him. He'll be banned from both worlds. I'll be a sinner in both worlds. It looks like there's a certain, satisfaction when the bones are intact, connected. I don't know what it is.
No, yeah, that makes sense actually.
And I don't want to be that, I don't want to die. I want Mashiach to come, we all live. You all know we're going to go one day, but we don't want to think about it. Mashiach comes, we stay alive, hopefully. Right. Anyway, so I wanted to say something. Now this is regarding ourselves. Actually, saying something bad to another person, cursing somebody else, that's also not allowed. The Torah has, if it's too simple or boring, let me know. Is it okay so far?
No, yeah.
You see, there's actually a verse in the Torah that it says, "Lo tekalel cheresh." You cannot curse a deaf person. Isn't that funny? Well, a deaf person I can't curse, but I'm allowed to curse a regular person. I'm allowed to curse a blind person. What is the Torah saying? Don't curse a deaf guy. So there's many explanations given. One of them is, many times we think that cursing is bad because I hurt the feeling of the other person. What if the person is not around? So he doesn't hear me cursing him, right? Or they're going to say, maybe don't curse him. Somebody's going to say what I said about him. What if the guy's deaf? He doesn't hear anything. So obviously me cursing him doesn't hurt him at all. So I might think there's nothing wrong with that. So the Torah says even a deaf person, you can't curse. It teaches us the reason why we can't curse is not because I hurt the other person. That's not the only reason. These words themselves are evil, shouldn't be said. Shouldn't come out of our mouths at all. We get upset at somebody, oh, drop dead. Honestly, that's a curse word. Shouldn't be said. If you're already praying for something, pray for good things. Should live for 120 years. Yeah, that way it should be. So again, from here we see from the fact that the Torah says don't curse a blind person, a deaf person, is teaching us that even if the person doesn't hear, he doesn't even feel bad. Just these words themselves are not good, they're not positive at all. I want to actually share a story with you, and based on a Gemara. I think I spoke about this a while ago. The Gemara says when we give charity to a poor person, we get 5 blessings. That's what the Gemara says. When we give charity, the poor man, we gain more than what the poor man gets. I think, I did him a favor. I give him money so he can buy food. So when I give him money, I did 1 mitzvah. I satisfied his hunger. I get 5 blessings in return, obviously from God. So I gain more when I give charity than the receiver. Now, what happens if I tell him some kind words? You know what? It's going to be better. Bezat Hashem will be good. Don't worry about it. May God bless you. Just encouraging words. So the Gemara says you get another 6 additional blessings. Total 11. So giving the charity gives you 5 blessings. But when you say encouraging words, you get 6 blessings. Why is it that encouraging words, looks like it's more powerful? It's more, I don't know, influential or something, more than the giving of the money. What's the reason? So, commentators explain, because when we give money and we buy food for this guy, that only satisfies his hunger for a couple hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, not more. But sometimes encouraging words could have an effect to change somebody's life completely. Yeah.
Is it different giving charity to like a Jewish organization and a non-Jewish organization?
Well, it's a good thing to help both, but again, I'm just going to bring you an example. It is good to help both. You're supposed to help both. But imagine if you have a brother and a non-brother, a sister and somebody else who's not your sister. Who comes first? Jews are all brothers and sisters. So if you could only help one, saying, so the obligation goes to your own brother. If you have enough money to help both, no problem.
Yeah.
The Torah says, a stranger amongst you, you have a commandment to give him food. Talk about non-Jews. It's a commandment to help non-Jews too. We are not prejudiced, The human being is a human being. So I wanted to share actually a story with you. A lot of us might resonate with us. When we get to a marriageable age. So in the beginning, when the first classmates get married, it's very, very exciting, right? No jealousy, no feeling bad. And by the way, we say, when do I know it's time for me to get married? I don't know how it's in the secular world. In the religious world is when your classmates start getting married, you better start hurrying up. Because if all the classmates get married and you're not married, people say, what's wrong with this guy? How come everybody else is married except him? Unfortunately, people make up stories. But I don't know how it works in the secular world. But this story happened with a girl. There were a lot of classmates. And the first girl gets engaged. So obviously when she gets married, they go to the synagogue for the blessings. And then, whenever all the other girls go for one of the girl classmates, or boys, the same thing too. When they go to the synagogue, oh, Mazal Tov. And then every, older lady in the lady section, oh, God willing by you, God willing by you. So in the beginning, you say Amen. So there was actually a girl that all her classmates got married. There were only 2 girls left. And she writes down in the story that she was so pained when somebody said, oh, you're not married yet? God willing by you. She felt, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm not married yet. It happened to me one time. I asked a girl, "You're not married yet?" She got so upset at me. I apologize. I didn't know. I realized that some people get sensitive, especially when everybody else is married except them. So then what happened is that finally the last girl, except this one, the second to the last classmate gets engaged to. And she gets married. She goes into the synagogue and everybody says, "Oh, you're the only one not married." She was like so pained. And then she decided, you know what? I'm not going to waste my time going on dates. I've done it for so many. She was close to 30. You know, so I basically forget it. I'm just going to stick to my job. I'm not going to get married at all. So once they finished praying, she was walking out from the synagogue, going to the place of the kiddush. Younger, married woman saw this girl and he says, "Oh my gosh, you look so fantastic. You're going to be a wonderful mother and a mom." That's all she said, and they even didn't know each other. So these words, when she heard it, says, "You know what? Maybe I'm going to be a wonderful mom, wonderful wife." And that night she was supposed to go on a date, and she decided not to go before because she was so hurt. And she heard these encouraging words. You look so beautiful. You look so much like a queen. Every Jewish girl is a queen, by the way, right? You look like so, like a real lady. She says, "You know what? Maybe I am." So she went on a date with that boy that night, and they ended up getting married. Just one encouraging words from a stranger. They even didn't know each other. So actually, from this story, we see clearly that sometimes a kind word could change somebody's life.
You think the words change the outcome?
It's possible. I don't know. I'm not God to know, but I believe that it's very possible because words have an effect. We know from Lashon Hara, when you talk evil, has an effect on the person. I spoke about this a while ago in the class. When I say something bad about somebody, that actually gives tremendous amount of power to Satan, unfortunately. So words definitely have an effect. Could be her words change something, but definitely in our physical world gave her such an encouragement that she actually went out and she got married. So that's one of the things that I wanted to discuss with everybody. Words are very important. Talk is not cheap. Unfortunately, in our society, they have made talk look like it's cheap, but really has tremendous amount of power. We see from our prayers, the words that we say, definitely has a lot of power. Any questions before we go to the second part, which we're going to discuss Purim a little bit, God willing? Any questions? I hope I'm not getting boring. What happened to our friends from last week? They're coming with, that's awesome. Years ago we had a program. Anybody that came late, I took off $1 from them. I got very upset at me. Emotion. I can't do that. So you have to pay $5 for me. I'm just kidding. With kids you can act like that. With adults, doesn't work. I only tell them that please do not come late to your own wedding. Everyone else is okay. I said that to one of my students, and he actually came late to his own wedding. It was really bad. Going to the next one, guys. We're going to talk about Purim a little bit. Everything that is in the Torah, obviously, because Torah is God's words, it has absolute truth to it. But there's some parts of the Torah that people don't see the truth. Say, come on, that's what God says. Maybe that's what Moshe said. God forbid. There's no truth to that, or at least they don't see the truth. There are certain things that Jews and non-Jews alike see the absolute truth. So if this truth is so powerful, you know what I'm saying, that even non-Jews, everybody sees it, so this must be a very, very powerful truth. So there is a lesson actually that we have from Purim, that we have find that at least the intellectuals of the non-Jewish world has realized that too. What you're going to discuss is the fact that the existence of Jewish people does not depend on nature. We are supernatural beings. Even though we are part of nature, but we're connected to above nature. And Purim actually proves it, and actually a lot of philosophers, there's a few of them, I don't have the book in front of me, but one famous one, we're going to discuss that soon, actually writes that in one of his letters. If you look at Purim, the story of Purim, you know what the story is, right? There was King Achashverosh, and he had a beloved wife, his name was Vashti, her name was Vashti, and then Vashti didn't listen to the king, didn't come to dance, so the king kills her, right? Now he's desperate, he needs a wife, obviously. So after 4 years of trying to find a wife, He finds this beautiful Jewish girl, Esther. Gets married to Esther. That's like in the 7th year of his kingdom. 5 years later, in his 12th year, Haman comes, that evil guy that wants to kill the Jews. And then, wow, look, when Haman wanted to kill everybody, all the Jews, so Esther goes to the king and he says, you know what, I'm a Jewish person. How could you allow this guy to kill my nation, myself? So, we got saved. But, it looks like, it was like a political thing. It was a bunch of luck. That, Esther came at the right time, right before Haman came. But if you look at it, honestly, this whole story doesn't make sense. Why? If you look at that time, probably in our history, Purim, before story of Purim, that was the luckiest situation for the Jewish nation. Never happened in the history to be like that. Why? Because that was the only time that the queen was a Jewish girl. They say Kate is Jewish. The English, whatever, the girl Kate Middleton, what's her name? Yep. The mother is Jewish. Her mom is Jewish. She's our sister. Her mom is Jewish. But the only thing is, she's not really a queen. She's just a figurehead, you know what I'm saying? They have no power in England. But you talk about in old Iran, before democracy, there was the only time in history that we had a religious Jew, a Jewish girl that was the queen. Now, that's a very great thing. The Gemara says in a few places that a wife of a person is like the body of the husband. The language is ishto kegufo. Right? I don't mean that, God forbid, she's a secondary. Actually saying as far as the importance goes, and actually has a halachic ramification too. We're supposed to give gifts to each other on Purim. So the Magen Avram was a big Ashkenazi rabbi. He says, I don't find ladies giving gifts to each other on Purim. Why not? When it comes to Purim, men and women are equal. So it says, I really don't know. Maybe the reason is because the woman is part of the husband. So when the husband gives the gifts, it's as if the wife is giving too. But Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, the Sephardic rabbi, doesn't agree with that. He says women have to give gifts of food to other women too on Purim. But the idea of ishto kegufo, it means that the wife is like the husband. It just shows us the power that Esther had. She wasn't just a queen. She actually had some of the power of the king. That was advantage number one. That never happened in history. Advantage number two that happened other places in history is the fact that Mordechai, who was one of the head of the Supreme Court, of the Jewish Supreme Court, he was actually one of the advisors of the king. So imagine at a time that the queen is Jewish, and one of the advisors is a top Jewish guy. You would think that that is the safest time for the Jewish people. Nothing is going to happen. That's what we hope. Forgive me, if Adam Schiff becomes the president, Israel is in danger, even those Jewish. Or Bernie Sanders, that's his name. He's a Jew, but he's going to protect the Palestinians. It looks like it. But I'm just saying again, at that time you had religious people. Esther was a religious woman. Mordechai was a God-fearing person. So obviously the Jews had the safest time. How could such a decree happen that suddenly Haman comes and he wants to kill all the Jews? Doesn't make sense. And actually the decree was the worst that we never had in our history. Why? You see, there's the Gemara Masechta Pesachim says, now we're all scattered all over the world. And it's a sad thing. But the Gemara says, actually, that's a kindness of God. When we don't all live in Israel, it's a kindness of God that you're scattered. Why? Because if there's evil decrees against the Jews in one country, there's no danger for them in the other countries. Not only that, even the Jews that are in danger in this country, they have a choice to run away, go to a different country. Our parents, myself, we're an example of that. When the revolution started in Iran, the danger was only in Iran. Thank God there was Israel, there's the United States. Some of us went to Israel, some came here. You could ask your parents, right? Or your grandparents. You all, refugees from Iran. And again, the possibility was because whatever, there's other countries we can run away to. So this was God's kindness. But in old Persia, they had nowhere to run away to because the king was ruling from India all the way to Ethiopia. Can you believe that? Half of Asia was under his rulership. You had the northern African countries under his rulership and most of Europe. And according to the Gemara, he actually ruled over the entire world. There was no way to run away to. They couldn't do that. And even when the Jews were in Egypt, we were all in the same country. Nobody was able to run away But Pharaoh had no interest to kill the girls. He only wanted to kill the boys. He didn't want to harm the girls, right? But here in Iran, they all lived in the same country. They had nowhere to run away to. And then Achashverosh and Haman wanted to kill everyone, boys and girls. So how could in such a good time politically, such an evil decree come? So the Gemara asks that. So the Talmud says, what happened that the Jews deserve such a bad destruction? So the Gemara actually says, because they enjoyed the meal that Achashverosh made. You know, it says Achashverosh partied for 180 days, right? I guess he partied more than Hunter Biden. I guess so, 180 days. But China didn't give him money at that time. He had his own money. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit on the Republican side. I hope you forgive me. I'm not a Democrat at all. I don't like them. Okay, good. Please don't tell Biden. He's going to raid my house. Yeah, so at any rate, so what happens is the Gemara says when Achashverosh made a 180-day party, after that he made another party for 7 days in Shushan. And the Jews went and they enjoyed the meal. The problem was that in that meal, Achashverosh brought the vessels of the Holy Temple of the Beit HaMikdash that was captured from Israel, and they drank wine in it and they used the plates to eat in them. So they showed total, lack of respect for the Holy Temple. That's what they deserve to die. That's what the Gemara says. So what do we see here? That Jews and nature don't go together. Politically, we could have the safest time in our history. Right? Politically, it was the safest time. But spiritually, because they got far from God, so the decree of Haman happened. Is that clear so far? Jews and nature don't go hand in hand. So physically, everything could be good. But again, if you don't have connection to God, then danger comes. Now, how did we get saved? Was the same way too. You see, let me ask you, years ago, when they captured those 13 guys in Iran, right? They said, I don't know if you guys were old enough to remember this. So they caught 13 guys, and the claim was that they're spies for Israel. One of the rabbis actually is here. Rabbi Zadmek was actually in jail for a couple of years, and he got beaten up in the Persian jail. On Pesach, they wanted to force him to eat bread, and when he refused, they punched him in his teeth. He went through a lot of pain. So, anyways, what did the world do at that time? Right? People, they did demonstrations in America and France, all over the world. So they went about it politically, and that's what it makes sense. When Jews are in danger, the first thing you should do, that's what people say. You got to use your political power, your diplomatic power, do something to save them. Seemingly, Esther should have done the same thing. When Esther hears that the Jews are in danger, she should have done something, diplomatically nice. But anyway, why was Esther so beloved by the king? He had no idea even who she is. Is she Jewish, not Jewish? He had no idea. Why did he love her so much? Simple answer. Exactly. She was beautiful. That's it. She was the most beautiful girl on earth. But anyway, that's a lesson for us. All Jewish girls are beautiful. And then the most beautiful girl is your own wife. Everybody else looks like a monkey. So somebody asked me in the shul, Rabbi, so does your wife look like a monkey to me? So I said, yeah, okay, that's the way it is. Like the guy attacked me. I said, okay, fine. That's okay. But anyways, because she was a beautiful lady. So now I'm asking you, what was the first thing that Esther did? It tells Mordechai, you want me to go to the king? You got to make sure everybody in Shushan fasts for 3 days. And what did Esther say? I'm going to fast myself for 3 days. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. If her whole advantage was her beauty, if she's going to fast, is that going to increase her beauty or diminish her? Diminish, forgive my Persian or English, diminish her beauty. It's going to make it less, right? People that don't eat for a couple of days, they look awful. So what gave her the right to fast? The question is actually even bigger. There is a halacha when Jews are in trouble. So it was our custom, old generations, we used to fast. So halacha says what happens, Jews are in trouble, but they have to run away from the enemy. The enemy is chasing them. So they can't fast. They have to eat to have the energy to run away. But at the same time, they got to fast for God to save them. What are they supposed to do? So halacha says don't fast. Take upon yourself, when you get out of the trouble, you will fast afterwards. So the fact that you take upon yourself to fast, that is good enough to annul the decree. So why didn't Esther do the same thing? You want to fast, you want to be religious, but you can't. You need your beauty for the king. So take upon yourself to fast after the Jews get saved. Right? Naturally, what she did doesn't make sense. Instead of making diplomatic ways, let all the Jews fast. I'm going to fast amongst them too. So the answer is very simple. They knew that the reason why this evil thing happened is because the Jews were distanced from God at that time. They enjoyed the party of Achashverosh. So because of that, they knew that you got to get closer to God. You got to get close to God. God will bring the salvation. Clear so far, people? So then then the people had to fast. Part of repenting is fasting. But you know what? Once the whole community fasts, an individual cannot take himself away. He can't separate himself from the community. So Esther didn't have the choice to fast later on. You got to look beautiful to go to the king. That's true. But you see, whatever we do in the physical world, it's only a conduit, or it's only like a vessel. It's only a tool to bring God's blessing. So the main thing is the connection to God. To make the diplomatic things, it will only be successful if God will bring the blessing. So therefore, the beauty was a secondary thing. So we see that the tragedy happened in an unnatural way, was the luckiest time for the Jewish people, and even their salvation came not in a natural way, came in a supernatural way. They first fasted, and then they went to Achashverosh to save them. Now, this is something that, anybody that wants to be honest, even amongst the non-Jews, they have realized that the Jewish survival is supernatural. There's this article about Jews that Mark Twain wrote. I saw it one time. You could probably Google it. I don't remember it clearly. So he says he has a very strong question. What is the secret of the Jews to survive? And he says, what makes a nation? There's three things that makes a nation. One is that they share the same country. The other thing is that they have the same language. And I think the third thing is the culture. And he says the Jews had none of them in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because the land of Israel we didn't have. We got it back at 1948, right? There's no land of Israel there. So we don't share the same country. Most Jews living in exile didn't speak Hebrew. I mean, even in this room, I'm sure the only ones that speak fluent Hebrew are the ones that have Israeli parents or are born in Israel. Most of us speak English better than Hebrew. I myself speak better English than Hebrew, even though I was in yeshiva for so many years, because I never really learned the language. I picked it up from learning Torah. So as I say as a joke, I speak Ivris. You know the Ashkenazi language? Not Ivrit. I don't know really. So they don't even have the same language. And then our culture is not the same either. Do you have any Ashkenazi Jews here? No, we all Sephardic. We all eat rice on Pesach. Ashkenazim don't. Right? We don't have the same culture. Sephardim say slichut for 40 days. Ashkenazim say for 10 days, maximum 12 days. We don't even have the same custom. So his question was, what actually made the Jews exist? How did they survive? And he makes the question bigger. The Romans came and they ruled all over the world for 300 years. That's it. When they collapsed, they're gone. They assimilated. Same thing with Greeks, same thing with old Persian Empire. They ruled for a few years, but once they collapsed, that was it. And the Jews are being persecuted almost 1900 years, and they still exist. So he writes down that this is the mystery, that he has no answer for it. We just got the answer tonight. That, the Jewish survival does not depend on nature. Naturally, we are extinct. Jews are, I think, 0.02, right? From out 8 billion people in the world, Jews are a little bit more than 15 million. So we're almost non-existent. And nevertheless, we have survived. And, we have given so much to the world, spiritually, medically, technologically, whatever you want to say. Jews are really one of the top. How's that? So actually the answer is because our existence is supernatural. We are connected to God. That's why we exist. There's actually a medrash. The medrash says a very interesting point. There are 71 nations in the world. I mean 71 countries. Noah, when he came out of the ark, so he had 71 kids. So the Jews are one of the nations. One. The other nations are 70. So the medrash says there are times in our history that the Jews are compared to a sheep. They live amongst 70 wolves. For example, World War II. Nobody raised a finger to save the Jews. The only country that actually protected the Jews against Nazis was the king of Morocco. He told Hitler, these Jews are my Jews, you don't touch them. He was the only king. He was a Muslim king, but he loved the Jews. He respected the Jews. Even up to today, I'm saying Morocco is, so to speak, more of a friendly place amongst all the Arab countries for the Jews. He had a lot of tzaddikim that lived there, they were buried there. So anyways, the whole world was quiet. They didn't care. Even in the United States, I don't know if you know the history of it, there were two boats, big ships that came from Europe full of Jews. And the Americans sent it back to Europe. And they were all slaughtered. They were all killed. The only time that America joined World War II and they destroyed the Nazis and all their allies was after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Before that, they didn't care. So there's actually times in our history that the Jews are all alone. Nobody cares to help them. So the Medrash says, if you're like one sheep among 70 wolves, so how do we survive? And you know what the Medrash says? It says, Gadol Haroeh. The shepherd is so great that he protects them and saves them. Our shepherd meaning God. So what's the Medrash saying in simple terms? Naturally, we can't exist. How could a sheep exist among 70 wolves? It's impossible. The only way is if the shepherd is standing and protecting him, and the shepherd is God. So in these words, these old-fashioned words, the Medrash is telling us that our survival 100% depends on God. So there's a lot of great things that we learn. First of all, never lose hope. Doesn't matter what nature looks like. Might be pretty bad, but you have no idea how many good things might happen. 1993. Anybody was born before that here? No. Okay, 1993. I remember that. That's when Clinton became the president, and he forced Israel. I'm not kidding. Into peace with the Palestinians. Before that, PLO was a terrorist organization. So said, no, bring the PLO, give them part of Israel, make peace with them. That was the time that they had all these bus bombings. I'm not kidding. Every day, tens of Jews were bombed. I said, you know what? Probably it's end of Israel. We were like so scared. But then you know what? Look at it now. They did it. Israel became even stronger. Now President Trump came and the Abraham Accord happened. I'm saying God changed everything. Everybody's so much scared of Iran that they all became allies of Israel. Or let's see, you look, when we got Israel back in 1948, the Arabs kicked out all the Jews out of their country. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Said, what? Israel can't exist. How did they kick them out? You can only take your jacket and your pants with you. That's it. No money, no house. Right? It was very tragic. These poor guys had to start their lives again. Now let's go back in times of Obama. What happened by the Arab Spring? You were there, you saw it on the videos, right? When the Arabs started fighting, the first thing they did, they attacked the minorities. You remember the Yazidis? I guess they're like half Christian in Iraq. So when ISIS, all those Muslims took over, there was actually a picture of a 7-year-old girl, Yazidi. After they violated her, they cut her head off. Imagine Jews still lived in Iraq. Imagine there were Jews still in Syria. God knows what they would have done. 70 years ago, when we just got land of Israel, 1948, we were all sad. These poor Jews lived there for hundreds of years. They kicked them out with nothing.
Where'd they go after the Where'd they go after?
They went to Israel, 1948. That's when we had land of Israel. They had to go to Israel. They had nowhere else to go.
Weren't they making Israel stronger?
They did, but they came as poor people. They had houses, they had money, they had businesses in the Arab countries. Imagine a 50-year-old guy go restart again, live in tents. There were not so many houses in Israel then. But looking back, thank God it happened. It was actually directed by God, so the Jews have a safe place to stay. So remember, no matter where we are, what happens, Jews are supernatural. Don't underestimate yourself. But the only way we become supernatural is if you're actually connected to God who's above nature. And that's through doing His will, by keeping Torah mitzvot. I hope it was okay. Any questions you guys have before we go further? And then any questions? No questions. Awesome. So let's end it here, Bezrat Hashem.